A few years ago, a 19th century legend spread like wildfire in the United States, the key points of which are a man named Thomas Jefferson Beale, encrypted documents, and a great treasure. It's a fabled mystery that no one has been able to solve. It's also known as the Beale Papers or the Beale Ciphers. It all began in 1885 with the limited publication of a pamphlet available for 50 cents in Lynchburg, Virginia. The title translated as The Beale Papers, containing authenticated statements about the treasure buried. The document was written by James B. Ward. It tells how Thomas Beale and his men stumbled upon a gold and silver mine in the state of Colorado during a buffalo hunt in 1819. The men spent 18 months mining the precious metals and transporting them to Virginia. They made several trips and brought thousands of pounds of gold and silver to a safe place, a hideaway that only Beale himself knew about. So he produced 3 full pages of numbers with the following coded information on them. The first page showed the exact location where the treasure was buried. The second sheet showed the contents of the treasure. Finally, the third sheet contained the names of all the men who had participated in the project and the names of their families. Beale had placed the coded documents in an iron chest and entrusted them in 1822 to Robert Morris, an innkeeper in Lynchburg, whom he strongly instructed not to open the box unless he or one of his men would not return within the next 10 years. One day, the innkeeper received a letter from Beale announcing the arrival of a friend with the key to the codes, but he never showed up. This was the last contact Beale had with Morris. 23 years had passed when the innkeeper decided to open the box and view its contents himself. Inside were 2 letters written by Beale and 3 pages of code that Morris was unable to decipher. So, decades later, he gave the box and its contents to an unnamed friend. This unknown friend, after many attempts, managed to decipher the second page using the US Declaration of Independence as a reference to the codes. His solution is as follows. I have deposited in Bedford Country, about 4 miles from Beaufort, in a pit or vault 6 feet below the surface of the earth, the following articles belonging in common to the people, whose names are enumerated on the 3rd page. At the depository are 1,014 pounds of gold and 3,812 pounds of silver deposited in November 1819. The second was laid out in December 1821 and consisted of 1,907 pounds of gold and 1,280 pounds of silver, as well as jewels with an estimated value of $13,000, which were exchanged for silver at St. Louis to facilitate transportation. The above goods are securely stored in iron jars with iron lids. The cave is roughly lined with stones, and the vessels rest on solid rock and are covered with other rock. Page number 1 describes the exact location of the cave, so there will be no difficulty in finding it. The stranger who had deciphered the second document, despite many efforts, could not decipher the other 2 pages, so he gave up and returned the papers to James B. Ward. The latter finally decided to find the treasure himself and decided to publish the story. This is the origin of the mysterious and strange story of the Beale Papers, which has become a mystery of national interest in the United States. Many people have tried to decipher the numerical codes of these papers, and several expeditions have been made in search of the treasure, but it's not known that anyone has succeeded, whether the treasure has been ever recovered. For this reason, the story could also be considered as an experiment or a big scam. There are some arguments in favor of this, such as that it does not make sense that more than 2 keys were used to solve the code. Since the Declaration of Independence serves as the code for the second document, one would think that all 3 pages could be deciphered in the same way, but this is not the case. Surprisingly, however, there have been people who have tried to solve the rest of the puzzle and have come up with some rather surprising results. This is the case, for example, with Dan Mento, who came into possession of the Beale papers and compiled all his research into a book, which he published under the name Beale's Treasure, a Freemason's Tale. The first thing Dan Mento did was to transfer the numbers to a map. The coordinates from the first document gave a possible route. When he compared it to a topographical map from 1891, he found an old road that looked very similar to his route. He did the same with pages 2 and 3 and found that the 3 paths formed an equilateral triangle. But the most interesting thing is that Mento noticed that on the 3 sides of the code there were numbers that did not correspond to the paths. There were 6 digits in total, and he checked if they could be transferred to latitude and longitude. This was the drawing that was made on the map when the 6 coordinates, the compass and the Mason's angle were connected. Dan Mento discovered that the name of the innkeeper in Beale's papers, Robert Morris, matches the name of Dr. Robert Morris, who founded the Order of the Eastern Star, OES, in 1850, and who had taught at Eureka Masonic College in Richland, Mississippi. Coincidentally, Eureka Masonic College, now called the Little Red Schoolhouse, is located on the site where Mento discovered the compass and the square. The connection between Robert Morris and the Order of the Eastern Star led Mento to an Order of the Eastern Star OES document entitled An Elaborate History of the Order of the Eastern Star by Jean McKee Keneston. This report mentions Mary A. Beale, Secretary of the OES of Illinois, 1882 to 1891, and her husband George H. Beale, a 32nd degree Mason. Mary and George had lived in Colorado for more than 2 years. During that time, George contracted tuberculosis, from which he died in 1880s. Coincidentally, both the Beale name and the Colorado location mentioned in Beale's records match. Apparently, data of the order was revealed in said document, which had to be coded and distributed to other lodges for later destruction. From Dan Mento's research, it appears that the Beale papers were simply coded information that was passed between lodges. Although many were looking for a real treasure, it seems that this was just a game played by the Masons and the source of a chain of misunderstandings until the Beale papers were finally published in 1885. But there could also have been a hidden manipulative intent, perhaps to conduct an experiment to see how far people would go and how they would react. Interestingly, the original publication of the Beale papers contained a warning addressed to all those who wished to pursue this mystery, which read as follows: "Again, never sacrifice, as I have done, your own interests and those of your family for what may prove to be an illusion. But, as I said, when your day's work is done and you're sitting comfortably by a warm fire, a little time spent on this subject can do no harm to anyone and may even be rewarded. There are still and will continue to be curious people like Dan Mento who didn't mind spending some of his time doing his own research to get to the bottom of the mystery. However, we don't rule out the possibility that more curious people will want to follow in his footsteps in search of a different explanation.